Would you pray with me? O Divine One, incline your holy ear to us. Open our ears that we may hear you speak through the depths of our hearts, through the chambers of creation. In the name of Christ. Amen. This is a story about a tree, a giving tree, somewhat Shel Silversteiny, a self-giving giant who willingly gives their full stature to the falling from chainsaw. Transported from Maine to mills in New Hampshire, pulped, pressed, processed, dyed, stamped, minted, stacked, wrapped, delivered to banks, withdrawn. Called not wampum, but money, hard cash. This is a story about a tree. This is a story about generosity. Tree Now Cash meets envelope. Nancy Stockford lovingly labeled with pass it on. Love God, love the people, pass it on. This monetary note, now invitation to do good with money and tell about it. To think anew about the meaning of offering. Offering not as asking for your alms, but offering as something that fills your palms, with an ability to freely give, to see beyond possibility, to receive instead of give, and then in giving once again, receive. Unbelievable. Believe. For this is a story about a tree. This is a story about generosity. This is a story about impossibility. It's a story about $750 being reverse distributed from the plate to palms here at this church just 4 weeks ago in worship. 20s with the prophetic face of Harriet Tubman stamped over Andrew Jackson's trail of tears, racist visage. 250 of these bills coming first as a gift from our presbytery with the directive, use it for mission or education. We took this gift, multiplied it, and educated ourselves in how mission can spread through the intentional passing on of many. Generosity blown out into the world like a milkweed pod to the breath flow of a child. Reversing this weekly practice of putting in the offering plate, we all took out and thus became an offering ourselves, an offering, a giving, an impossible giving. For with these dollars are directive to transform, to be transformed, to become love with legs, compassion in action. But quick comes the doubt. In this cynical age of truth defeated by tweets, can change really come? Is transformation ever possible? Or rather, an impossibility? For it's nothing. A few bills that came from a tree. What lasting good, what real change can be born of mere dollars, 5 or 20? For it's nothing. No, it's everything. For it's more than currency, it's current, you see, the electric flow that passes between two people infused with possibility. Yes, a story about what seems an impossibility, but when embodied, when enfleshed, becomes reality. For this is a story about a tree. This is a story about generosity. This is a story about impossibility. This is a story about deep Christianity. The truth of life beyond death, love over fear, hope beyond despair. It's the story of Jesus, of Mary, of Joseph, of shepherds, of tax collectors, of Zacchaeus and sycamores, of Peter and breakfast on a beach, of Judas and Timothy, Miriam and Moses, of Eve and Eden and Adam, of Rahab, Ruth and Naomi, of Malachi, Dr. King, Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day, Daniel Berrigan, Julian of Norwich, Oscar Romero, Memo and Amanda, Luis, Concepcion, Dean, Newell, Elsa, and Yahweh, and her spirit fire dove who transcends to set us all free. This is a story of deep Christianity. This is a story of you and me. and the tendrils of transformation that come from the impossibility of giving. This is the story of Mary, who after hearing from someone how terrible the shelter is and how too cold to sleep outside, offered the $10 from her envelope, which elicited a stunned and gracious response and a decision to go spend it on a quiet, private, hot dinner. This is the story of Donald, who added another Tubman 20 to the enclosed 10, and while crossing the David Ortiz Bridge, encountered a woman experiencing without home syndrome, whose old shopping cart carried her belongings adorned with cardboard signs. Donald unhesitatingly passed it on. This is a story about Kirsten, who after repeatedly forgetting to give the money away, shared her forgetfulness aloud while with a friend who said she could help her, and so the gift was passed on. Kirsten gave the money and the directive to do good with it, and also the verses from Luke's gospel about not being afraid, praying always, and not giving up. This is a story about Devin, who moved to bake a homemade casserole accompanied by fresh store-bought cookies, delivered both to Friday Cafe in Cambridge to bountify their Friday lunch. This is a story of Catherine, who bought some feminine hygiene products for the ladies below us and above us at Women's Lunch Place, and mixed in some discounted Halloween candy to sweeten the deal. This is a story of a congregant who donated to Planned Parenthood. It's a story of another congregant who donated to the Community Day Center in Waltham. This is a story about a covenanter who, after 2 weeks of the money burning a hole in their pocket, walked out of worship on a Sunday and encountered an older woman who she thought might appreciate the gift and handed it to her with a simple saying, "God bless." This is the story of one-time visitors Patty and Steve, who were here from Athens, Georgia, celebrating their 50th anniversary, when they received an envelope with 10. After talking and praying at great length on how to pass it on, after considering groups like the Northeast Georgia Food Bank, Family Promise, the American Cancer Society, they decided to spend their gift and give it to a local ministry called Sparrow's Nest that helps the disenfranchised in their city. Steve shared how this ministry's AA program saved his life, and for the past 3 years, he's been sober. Patty is certain that more people will be blessed by this gift of being able to give back to this group that has helped them so significantly. This is a story about Elaine, who, grateful for the generosity of this great reversal, matched the cash in her envelope and bought postage stamps for the Women's Lunch Place, where she volunteers at the Resource Center, a place where guests often need stamps to mail job or housing applications, to send cards to family and friends. Elaine also took this opportunity to ask lots of her friends what they would do given this opportunity, sparking discussions, generosity sparking generosity. This is a story about others who, inspired by this great reversal, also matched their cash and then sometimes added more, like Faith, who was moved by a mention in our bulletin about an affordable housing initiative and sent Hyde Park Presbyterian a check. Like Mark and Nancy, who combined their money, added to it, and gave it to their friend Katie on her 60th birthday, who then passed it on to her favorite organization, the Waltham Family School, who works with English language learners and their children. Like Anita and Holly, who pooled their money and matched it and gave it to the Medicine Wheel, a nonprofit here in Boston focused on community healing through art, founded by Michael Dowling, who many years ago led our congregation in a Lenten art contemplation. Like John, who combined the funds with money of his own to facilitate a larger donation to the Immigrant Justice Corps. His hope is that that gift can in some way improve conditions for families who seek better lives by becoming neighbors, and that it can help those who are so unfairly treated so often by our government. Like Tim and Betsy, who pooled and supplemented their gift and gave it to the GBIO 2019 Impact Fund. Like Christine and Guy, who combined theirs and upped it by 50 and gave it to the repairers of the breach to support their faith-based voter mobilization in Louisiana and Kentucky. Like Karen, who added to what she received and gave to Brad and Daniel Day's New York bike ride to raise money for Multiple Sclerosis Research Fund. Or like Barbara, who is grateful that this reverse offering landed on the same day as the Boston Vegetarian Food Fest, organized so beautifully by our own Evelyn Kimber. At this Veggie Fest, Barbara took her 10 that she'd received, she doubled it and gave it to the House Rabbit Network, the wonderful, generous Massachusetts nonprofit who foster neglected, abandoned, abused rabbits and tries to find them loving homes. This is a story about me who, on that Sunday, forgot to receive an envelope, but later that day found a 20 on the sidewalk. And deciding to double that myself, thought that I would give to a detainee here in Suffolk jail, and found out they've already been transferred to Bristol and other jails in our Commonwealth. And after several hours of trying, found it impossible to donate to an anonymous detainee to their canteen fund, so instead gave to the Border Fund, the International Community Foundation, serving those families who are too often separated. This is the story, finally, of Megan and Joe, who found a local, compelling way to pass it on. An 11-year-old in their town was organizing donations for a hospital on Long Island and the Ronald McDonald House. For a few months ago, he was in a serious accident and suffered a major brain injury. Thankfully, in part to the work of the Ronald McDonald House, he is okay now and on a full road to recovery. This nonprofit helped him by providing Lego sets, puzzles, and games that he was able to use, which were an instrumental part of his mental recovery and the reactivation of his brain. And so Megan and Joe realized that they wanted to give back to him, to this boy who was deciding to then pass it on to others. He is collecting a drive of games and Legos and money to give back what he received. Friends who love God and love the people, all of this together is a deeply inspiring collective story. One that speaks of the power of relationships, the power of connection, the power of intention, of impactful giving, the power of God multiplying all these things that seem impossible at first. This is a story about the power of stories. The power that comes when we tell our stories. It's one thing to do something, it's another to tell it, to broadcast it so it can live again and again, so it can take on a second life, a witnessed and resurrected life that inspires others. The story of our gospel, the story of a loving God entwined in our world, a God whose steadfast love will not let us go, a God who is at the heart of all stories, a God who brings us together across difference, a God who shows up in our scarcity and transforms us abundantly into impossible givers. So yes, this is a story about a tree, about generosity and possibility, deep Christianity, you and me, a story about story, and finally, it's a story about hospitality. For Catherine served up 1 Kings and introduced us again to an unnamed widow, you see. A true central character in our Hebrew reading, she. Elijah sent by God to stay with her, not just to visit, but to stay. A widowed Gentile, she, a Jewish prophet par excellence who speaks truth to King Ahab's corrupt power, he. God brings them together. But this woman does not receive the divine memo. She does not know who this wild and hungry one who emerges from the Wadi wilderness is, but she knows, written deep in her heart, the divine command to welcome the stranger. But with what can she welcome? For this story begins with deep scarcity, the context of drought, failed harvest, lingering death. Elijah asks for a little water. He begs for a morsel of food. He pleads out of his need. The widow is stunned. Me give to thee? Look at me. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a bit of oil in a bottle. You see, look at me. Collecting 2 sticks to make food for my son and me, the last food we'll see before from life we'll flee. But Elijah is driven by God to encounter, to relationship, to engagement, and so lifts up the angelic hosts proclaim and refrain, do not be afraid. God has promised provision. Even through scarcity, we see, through the impossibility of giving, your Son, you and I shall find nourishment and liberation. And so open to impossibility, the beloved widow provides for the beleaguered prophet, her son, and herself. And for many days, they all find nourishment. The jar and jug don't run out. The radical hospitality shown to Elijah leads to abundance. Even in the face of scarcity, relationships across difference. The prophet is transformed by the widow and the child's poverty. It is the message of God, a messenger of God who receives a message from God from the one who seems to have nothing to give. She teaches he. She teaches about the centrality of love most realized in the power of community. So, church family, how to sum up the takeaways of this story. We see as a rare gift each waking day, might not our jars and jugs stay? As we follow the renewed vision for missional, intentional living these next 5 years, will we be led by our hopes or by our fears? The ripple effect of giving should certainly spark our daily generous living. In this season of generosity, in the face of what seems impossibility, may we together trust in God's abundant jubilee. May we, like the unnamed beloved widow, give impossibly and so be set free. May we be transformed beautifully. For this is indeed the gospel story. We know that God still goes that road with us.